Hey guys, welcome back. Alright, so we got our pretty much all the high power wirings done, except for like one wire, but I'll show you. Now this doesn't include things like pumps and fans, this is like the big stuff. So let me sneak around the car, we'll have to set it down in a minute. So here's the starter motor up there, you can see this big wire here. That's a number 2 red wire, and it's got this plastic jacket over it, split loom, to give it some extra protection. We got it zip tied here in 2 different spots. So for strain relief, snakes here behind the subframe, comes through here, right there, and then let me get the light going. So I bought these snaps. You see these on OEMs all the time. It's like they click, you drill a hole, they snap in, and then they have a little latch that opens and closes. So I put those in. Might add an extra because you can see here we got, this is also our main ground. So typically actually on Mazdas they ground like this as well, or something. Yeah, they hook to like the PPF, but this is the closest thing is the tail of the transmission. Same thing, number 2 wire, big ass bolt. And so these wires run back through here. I didn't hook them to this because this unbolts. So they're just like, actually they're laying here, but they're not bolted to it. So it makes it easy to remove. And then this main big ass wire, if we snake up here, this goes there. That's our kill switch. So we can disconnect, and of course the big fat wire loops into our battery box. I'll show you guys that in just a second. Here's another ground. So this is like our rear chassis ground. So that just goes from the battery to the rear of the chassis. And actually I didn't show you one of our grounds. I forgot about it. I actually just hooked it up. Here's our front chassis ground. So it goes from the engine block, loops over and hits the subframe. So that's pretty much all the grounding. The only thing that's left for grounds, this guy's coming out of the top of our battery box, and it's going to go something like this. And then coming off of here, there's going to be a short wire, and there'll be a quick disconnect plug. That's where we plug in the car to charge it. I don't have the plugs yet, so that's why that's not hooked up. But anyway, let's jump into the battery box. I'll show you what we did there, because a lot of work happened in that thing. Alright, here it goes. So this one little change we made, this used to be what held the battery box in place, but then you can't open it and service it. So I wanted to put bolts that connected the box to the metal, but I was afraid the bolts would, like, you know, like if you wrecked the car, the bolts could like, just a second. Okay, I had to get that lid out of the way. So I didn't want to put bolts because if you ever get in a wreck, there'd be a sharp bolt that could puncture the battery. So here's what we did. If you look in the very back there, we actually drilled a hole and then used zip ties to loop the box in that way. So it's just plastic, so you can't pierce the battery. Alright, let me try to go over this battery. So it's hard to see because I have everything well protected at this point. If you look in the very back, you'll see that yellow. That's a Kapton tape. There's some there as well, actually. You can see that one a lot better. So basically, this is our electrical connections. These are buses. You can kind of see through the tape. This is connecting the cells together in a series. There's another one up here, hard to see because there's tape all over this. So what we did, there's several things going on. This little pack, this is for cell balancing. So each one of the cells has a wire hooked up. So you got like your ground, which is black, and then this is like your first cell. So this is like basically 3 volts, 6 volts, 9, 12, and 15 approximately. And there's a device that plugs into this. I can show you that device. And what it does is it can measure the voltage between cells, and if one of the cells is ever like higher than the other, this little circuit will automatically adjust them. This is important on lithium batteries to keep the cells balanced. So that's what this guy does. I already bought one of these for 12 volt, but we moved to 15 volt or 16 volt, so I needed to buy a different one. So there it is. This is called an active balancer. It can actually, it's got circuitry where it can move power around, so it can do up to like 5 amps. Which is plenty. We're not even going to leave that hooked up most of the time because you really don't need it. Like, your cells don't get out of balance from one use. But if you just keep charging and discharging, charging and discharging, eventually they can get out of balance. So every once in a while, we just plug it in and it'll balance the cells. The reason we don't leave it hooked up all the time is because this device pulls power even when it's not balancing. It doesn't pull much, but I don't want it draining my battery needlessly either. And anyway, now I want to go over some safety stuff. So this battery, the individual cells have what's called fish tape. It's this like really dense paper that's electrically insulative, and I wrapped all the cells in that fish tape before I built the pack. And that kind of gives it like puncture resistance. You've got this really hard paper, so if anything ever pokes this, it's less likely to puncture. And it's got some electrical insulation, because actually between the cells, you can't see it because it's all wrapped, but they're actually really thin what protects the cells. They're basically just plain bare cells with very minimal protection, so that's one of the reasons we did that. Now on the top here, you'll see this Kapton tape. We put a bunch of that. We put several layers of Kapton. And the reason is just for safety. Like, nothing should touch that, but what if it did? So Kapton tape, it's kind of like electrical tape, except it's thinner, like kind of more dense. It's like a plastic film tape. It's a polyamide, I think. But it's electrically insulative, really thin, and it's electrical. I want to say it's like 600 volts for 1/1000 of an inch. So anyway, we used that. We put several layers, as you can see. There's probably like 5 layers on this thing. We did that to every single connection. One of the reasons is, so this big ass red wire here, it goes all the way to the back. I can't really get the camera. Actually, I might can. Not really. The wires are all run. Way back there, there's a lug. It looks like this big black one here, except it's in the back and it's red. But what I didn't want is for it to touch like this, because that would be a short. So, granted, this one could probably be a little bit better protected, but that back one, we triple heat shrinked this wire. So you can see here there's a layer of heat shrink. There's actually 2 more underneath it, and then we put split loom over it as well. So that wire is just incredibly well protected. Here, now that I'm looking at it, I think we're going to throw some extra protection. Even though for this to short, this has, hell, that might just be 1 layer on this one. But even to short, it's got to go through the heat shrink. It's got to go through this green stuff, which there's 2 layers of. Then it's got to go through like 5 layers of that yellow before it could touch. And they're not actually touching right now. There's a gap. Anyway, just showing you the point. It's fairly well done, but I am going to beef that up a little. So anyway, all that being said, this is our battery. Same as always, lithium iron phosphate, 105 amp hours, 16 volts, approximately 1.7 kilowatts of power. So, should be able to run the car for several hours racing, or at least, you know, not continuously, but you know what I mean. It should run for hours at a drag strip before it needs to be charged. This little guy here, it's not wired up yet. That's a current sensor. So there's this little plug that goes there, and I've got to upgrade the wires and extend them, and then run those to the front where they'll hook into our amp meter. But this monitors power going in and out of the battery, so that'll be nice for charging and discharging. So we can actually get an idea of our state of charge just based on that, which is kind of cool. Let's see, anything else important in here? I guess you'll note there's only 1 giant red one. The reason we did that is so we can measure everything here. So that red wire loops over here, and then our charging post is going to hook up to this. And it's just going to dangle like right here, so it'll be a short wire. Now, we were going to put one in the front of the car. We had planned to do that. I've changed my mind right here at the last minute. Let me show you why. So here's a diagram, back of the car, front of the car. You'll see right here, we've got that giant beefy wire coming here, and then we got the number 8 that we said is going to be for our plug. But you'll see on the diagram there's a third one that goes all the way to the front, and we were going to have a charging plug up here. Now, I do like the idea of having a charging plug in the front of the car just because it's convenient. But if I do that, I do have to run this wire all the way to the front, and this wire has no fuse or switch. It's hot all the time. Even if you hit the kill switch off, you would still have this one positive wire going all the way to the front. From a safety standpoint, I don't love that. I do like that if I hit the kill switch, everything up here is totally dead. And if I run this wire, technically this one wire is not dead. So for now, we're just going to run the back one. It's safer, it's technically lighter, it's less convenient, but we're going to do this. This may not ever be an issue anyway. Most people that charge their cars have a connection at the back. So if we really want to, we could always add that down the road. We do have the wire. In fact, I have a whole spool of wire, so there's no problem with that. So anyway, figured I'd mention that. But you can see in our diagram, we do have these 2 big wires that go forward. These go to the fuse blocks in the panel we built. I'll try to show you that. So I don't think we actually talked about that yet. So if we get up here in our switch, you'll see that big fat battery wire. This is coming out of the kill switch. So this big red one here, that goes from the battery to here, jumps across our kill switch. Then we've got this wire, that's our starter wire, goes up to the starter, but this is the two that run the car. These follow like this. They've got some protection because this is a piece of metal here. I'm going to do something else to hold that up, but give it some extra protection. Then they split, they go through grommets. I put zip ties on it so that if you pull or push, it doesn't, like, it limits how much that can move. Let's see if I can film this. I guess I can. There it is coming out of the firewall, the rear firewall. Shoots down to the floorboard and into the panel. So we now have two big red wires going right up to our panel. That's our power going in, so pretty cool. Glad to have this going. Basically our high power wiring is done. The only thing left, like we said, is that charging connector, which I thought I bought it, but I didn't, so I had to order it. And I'm waiting on it to come in, and I don't want to cut wires to length when I don't have the connector in hand. So we're waiting, but that's what this is. That's our ground for our charging cable. And you can see it'll go something like that. And about where this is dangling, that's probably where the plug's going to be hanging to plug in to charge. So anyway, we're getting close. This little battery was actually quite the project. Building your own lithium cell for a race car and trying to do it decently well. Like, I don't have a... I actually purchased a BMS. I could have set a, well, it's a 12 volt, not a 16 volt. But I did buy a BMS, but it's not really, I wanted to do it this way instead. I wanted to kind of roll my own stuff. So this is what we did. I'm pretty happy with it. We're gonna, I don't know, that's probably gonna wrap this video up. But basically the next thing we gotta do is we're gonna start actually running, let me think, probably start running wires. The only thing I can think of, so we do have to run, obviously we got to start running wires to, like, you know, cooling fans, water pumps, injectors, ignition coils, all that stuff. But the other thing we got to do, and we actually started on it, here's an example of it. So this is where our crank sensor plugs in, and this is like the weird plug that hooks to our crank sensor. I need to, like, make pigtails that come off because this is way too short. So we got to get some of those ready, and then figure out, like here's our headlight one, same thing, they're too short. So all of these need to get, like, extended or something. Figure out what we're using, what we're not. Some of these are damaged, so basically getting repairs to where everything's ready to go, and then we can start putting this on the car. So anyway, it's gonna wrap this one up. Hope you guys have enjoyed this, and until next time, y'all take it easy.